Hi everyone, and welcome to our presentation of Uganda and doing business in Uganda and why Uganda would be or would not be a great country to start a business in.
Okay, lovely to meet all of you, and thanks for your interest in Uganda. Well, as you may know already, Uganda is located in East Africa. Uganda is a land-linked country, so doesn't have a coast. We rely heavily on Kenya and Tanzania for access for our goods, but we take the aspect of being land-linked as an advantage, because Uganda is strategically located as a link and a way between East Africa and West Africa.
So we'll start with the political landscape. So Uganda is a presidential republic, which means that the head of state is the president of Uganda. The president is assisted by a prime minister and a cabinet. Both the government and the National Assembly have legislative power, but the executive power is given to the government only. And Uganda has a multi-party system where all citizens over the age of 18 have equal rights. Though the popular, who is elected by popular vote, serves a 5-year term, and the current president, re-elected the 14th of January in 2021, is Yoweri Museveni. His prime minister is Robina Nabanya, and the vice president is Jessica Alupo, and they are all members of the National Resistance Movement. The next elections will take place in 2026, and the parliament is currently consisted of 529 seats, where 164 seats are reserved for women with 1 seat per district. However, there's a side note to the popular vote. Elected by the popular vote can be put between quotation marks, because according to the Human Rights Watch, the last elections were marred by abuses, and opposition supporters and journalists were arrested, and protesters were killed. And the internet was also shut down, and there was no access to social media for an entire month.
Hello, I'm now going to talk about the climate of Uganda. Uganda is actually on the equator, and this makes it enjoy tropical weather all year round. The temperature averages between 16 and 26 degrees Celsius. There is no actual summer or winter, but there are 2 rainy seasons in Uganda, which are from March to May and from September to December. And this climate makes it an ideal place for plants to grow, making it an optimum place for agricultural investments, especially that 71.9% of the land of Uganda is actually agricultural land. So it's actually really good for investments in the agriculture. And another thing about the climate in Uganda, that it also gives an optimum temperature for tourists to visit Uganda all year round, and this makes it an ideal also location for investors to invest in tourism sectors in Uganda, especially that there's the diverse wildlife and the breathtaking landscapes and the immersive cultural experiences in Uganda. This makes it an ideal location for agricultural and tourism investments, just from looking at it from the climate aspect.
Now we will look at the socio-economic landscape of Uganda. Demographically, the younger population provides businesses with a significant cheap workforce, which is still growing for the foreseeable future. It is, however, important to note that the highly experienced employees are scarcer. Uganda's Gini coefficient shows us the population is on the higher end of income inequality, but similar to the United States of America's rating, therefore it is most likely not an issue. The education is only compulsory for primary schools from the age of 6 to 12 for a period of 7 years. Primary school enrollment is good, which provides the general population with the basic academic skills. The secondary school enrollment and tertiary education enrollment, however, are seriously lacking, and school infrastructure is often inadequate. Uganda shows low unemployment rates. This means that most citizens have financial security and can afford to participate in the consumption economy beyond their basic needs. This creates demand and therefore grows Uganda's GDP. The age range of 15 to 64 years old encompasses Uganda's workforce. 87.7% of employment is in the private sector, while 12.3% of employment is in the public sector. The three major employment sectors are agriculture with 72% of the total employment. Then there is services with 21% of the total employment, and industry with 7% of the total employment. And unfortunately, in the last few years, the service and industry sectors took a significant hit in employment, while the agriculture sector had a weighty employment growth, which is a bad sign for economic development.
So I'm going to be talking about how to do a business in Uganda, the steps to take, and also how much it costs to do a business in Uganda. Uganda is one of the best countries to do a business in because of its macroeconomic policy and its growing internal market and also accessible internal market. Registration of companies in Uganda is quite straightforward. As long as you have all your documents complete, you can register your business in 2 working days. 5,000 euros is enough to start a business in Uganda. We are advised to start on a smaller scale in order to understand the market of Uganda better. Agriculture, tourism, and financial services are the growing businesses in Uganda, and these are the businesses you can actually invest in easily in Uganda.
Hello, I'm going to talk about the laws and regulations and cooperation agreements for import and export in Uganda. First of all, in Uganda, there are no taxes on anything to do with the tourism sector. For example, if you want to get some safari vehicles for the tourism, if these safari vehicles are registered as tourist vehicles, then they will not be charged with taxes. And also there are no any taxes on any agricultural input. For example, tractors, soil fertilizers, machines, anything that could be used for agricultural purposes doesn't have any taxes imposed on it. And the corporation income tax in Uganda, is 30%, which is the chargeable income of companies, and except for the resident companies whose turnover does not exceed 150 million UGX. And this I believe is a relatively high tax, and it's not a very low tax when compared to the services you take in return, and when compared to the region. But I think that it might be fine, especially when doing business or investing in the agricultural or tourist sectors. I believe that there's a huge potential of success for especially these two kinds of investments. And the authority which is responsible for all the taxes in Uganda is called the Uganda Revenue Authority. Also, about the agreements, there's the East African Community, the EAC, which is a regional intergovernmental organization which consists of 7 states, which include the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda, and Burundi. This organization was founded in 1967. It collapsed, and then it got revived in the year 2000. I believe that it has a full potential, especially in the 2010 this organization has launched its common market for goods, labor, and capital within the region, with the goal of creating a common currency.
And now we will talk about cross-cultural aspect. To get a better vision of the cultural differences, we used the Hofstede model comparison to compare Belgium and Uganda's cross-cultural aspect. And from the scale we found that Belgium has more weight than Uganda in power distance, individualism, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. But Uganda has more masculinity rate. First of all, we start with power distance. That data indicates that Uganda has PDI score of 38. This suggests that Ugandans have a low level of acceptance of inequality among social members. And second of all, we have individualism. Ugandan culture is very collectivist compared to Belgium, which has lowest IDV score. Uganda's constitution of development maintains a healthy balance between individualism and collectivism in organizational culture. Third part is masculinity. This refers to how job roles and tasks have been distributed between male and female members of the organization. The data indicates that Uganda has a masculinity score of 57. This score suggests that Ugandan culture is masculine as opposed to feminine. And fourth part is uncertainty avoidance. Ugandan culture has a relatively low tolerance for uncertainty, but not to extreme extent. Organizations that have a culture of high uncertainty avoidance tend to have more control and perspective. The data indicates that Uganda has a UAI score of 56 out of 100, possible 100. And the last one is long-term orientation. Uganda's constitution of development operates with a long-term orientation is strategic focus and development. The data indicate that Uganda has a LTO score of 20. The score suggests that Ugandans have a culture that is very short-term orientated. And now I will let my next colleague to explain more about the project.
And now on to cultural heritage. The opinion of a Belgian person that has visited Uganda. We had the honor to speak to Michael and Angela. Michael is Belgian and Angela is from Uganda. She was born in Kampala. Michael met Angela while he was in Uganda for work at the start of the pandemic. They both work in education, and Michael was helping them to set up a faculty that revolves around tourism. Tourism is something that the government is currently investing in. So Uganda also has some good agriculture when it comes to tea, sugar, and coffee. So the next thing they want to invest in is tourism. Michael tells us that he had quite a culture shock when he arrived in Uganda, but not a negative one, a positive one. He told us that when he arrived, the people were so open and so welcoming, while Angela had a different culture shock because they currently live in Belgium now, that we are very closed people, which was hard on her. An example that Michael gave us was that he had no car while visiting Uganda, so people there were willing to borrow him one, something that we wouldn't do in Belgium. He also told us that his friends were a little bit worried about him going to Uganda, thinking that it was dangerous, but they couldn't be more wrong, apparently. Michael says there was no single moment that he felt unsafe, and Angela and Michael tried to visit Uganda 2 times a year if possible. Angela was born in Kampala, which is the capital of Uganda, and that's also where she met Michael. We asked her if she had some tips and tricks for us, and one would be that she recommended us not to drive on our own in Kampala, but to hire someone that's an experienced driver, because while a 20-kilometer drive in Belgium takes around 30 minutes max, that same 20 kilometers can easily be a few hours in Kampala, just because the roads are not as good as here, and that's an underestimation. Michael also jumped in telling us that we should go rafting on the Nile. And he ensures us that it's very safe over there because there's an entire team with you. And that's because the labor is very cheap in Uganda, so they are able to hire more staff, and that can be for safety as well.